Hey there, this is Jonathan, and in the following tutorial, we're going to take a look at using CSS in a builder environment, in a WordPress builder environment. I happen to be using Elementor, and if you've used Elementor before, of course you know that you can go and click on all the different elements such as you have here, and you can edit all the different styles that you want. Elementor is really great. It gives you access to change all the sizes and the fonts and everything that you might want to do with your particular design. The problem with this, though, is that across an entire website, this is not really an efficient way of creating style changes across your website. And so I actually don't really like to use that. I don't like to use the typography and text shadow and other things of a lot of the builders. I really use the builder for the different types of content and the general layout. And instead, I use CSS for the styling as much as possible so that it can be repeated on other pages if I have a multi-page website. A landing page, really not such a big deal, but you'll notice that there's some really cool things that we can do with these custom styles. Now, looking at this page real quick, you'll notice that I've got a lot of different types of content. I've got this thing that's called an image box, and here I've got a title, and this is an H1, and then I have another subtitle, and that's an H2, and then I have a button. You'll see it's called a button right there. I called it the CTA button. And of course, I can align this button with all the different elements here, but we're going to change up some of these styles with our CSS. So if you've made any changes on your page, go ahead and do update that. And I'm going to go back to just preview this page. I want just to get the regular preview of this page. The reason that I want to do this is because I'm going to bring up the ability to change my styles. And it's going to be as simple as clicking on the customize. Now, before I do that, though, I want to talk about a couple different ways to use CSS in your theme. Now, one of the main ways of doing it is by going to your editor and being able to edit the style CSS file that you have in your particular theme. Now, this is a great way to use your CSS when you are in your production environment. That is, when you are delivering this website. But like many servers, the one that I'm currently on has a cache. And what happens is it caches those files, and then it makes it sometimes difficult to see the changes that you're making on a live website. Sometimes you have to purge the cache, and then you have to refresh and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to come back to that at the end. An alternate way is by using a plugin. I really do like this plugin called Add Custom Code. CSS, JavaScript, and HTML is possible with this particular plugin. Plus, when you go to this particular plugin, you'll see that you have the ability to link this CSS as an internal or external file, and the internal is the default. And that's good because it does any overrides. It makes sure that you do get to see these things, disregarding the cache. And you can choose it to go in the header or the footer, and you can tell it front end, admin, and even the login page. So this is a really nice plugin to be able to use. However, as I've been discovering on other sites, really a great way of doing it is actually by using the CSS that's built in to your customize feature. Now, once you're viewing the page, you can go up to customize at the top, or you can go into the customizer from the left-hand menu when you're in your back end. And basically, you go to this, you click on the additional CSS at the bottom, and then I'm going to close that so I get a little bit more room. And now what you can see is I've got a pretty cool way of putting in CSS. And what's great about this is that I can go and inspect the CSS for the mobile and tablet and desktop, although we're just going to worry about desktop right now. Plus, what's great about this is that this is a live CSS editor, meaning as soon as I make a change, you're going to see the live results. Now, the hardest part of applying CSS to your content is being able to inspect what styles or what CSS selectors you have to override. So you have to become an investigative CSS person. And the way we do this is you right click on your content and you choose inspect. You can do this both in Chrome and on Firefox, of course. Then what we're trying to do is find out where we're at within the structure of our site and what CSS is being used currently. And you can see right here, I've got this Elementor widget heading and then Elementor heading title. And you can see that is where the color of that blue is coming in. And so what we want to typically do is start off by copying that and then paste it over into the left. And then let's just change the thing that we want to change. I'm not actually going to change it all. Maybe I'll keep the font weight the way it is. And I might come back to that Roboto here in a bit and maybe include a new font if I really want, because Roboto is not the best font in the world. But this color would be nice to change. So I could change it to white, FFF, and you'll see as soon as I make that change, then it's applying it to both of these. Now the reason it's applying it to both of these is because I have kind of a generic selector here. This just says Elementor widget heading and then Elementor heading title, and there is a space between the two. If I look carefully though at my code, you'll see that I have an H1, which is the class, which is the element that the class Elementor heading title is applied to. So if I just want it to apply to the H1 and not the H2, I can put in a type, an H1 at the beginning of this, and now it's doing Elementor heading, Elementor widget heading, and then H1 Elementor heading title, and you'll see I can make that change. Now I could do something as well, such as font size. And one of the things I do like about the customizer is that it helps you also write your CSS, because it gives you hints for it. And I'm going to do this at 200%. Whoops, 200%, making it a little bit bigger, or maybe even 300%. 300%. And that makes it 300% of whatever the default font size that you have in your installation of this site. Now I'm going to copy that and paste it, and then change it to the H2, and then make the other changes that I might want, such as maybe this is only 150, and instead of making it white, I'd like to make it a different color. Maybe I'll make it the red that we have up here. Now, one of the things that you can't do is you can't easily inspect this color and find it. So I find that using a plugin such as Colorzilla is essential. And here you can use that. You can hover over it, find that red color, copy it, and you'll see it's copied those colors to the clipboard, and then I can paste it in, and you'll see I get that change. Now we can also do this with our CTA button, so I'll click on that and inspect it, and I have to kind of go through the different levels of this button to find out where is that background color being applied. And that background color being applied right now is this really long selector. So I'll copy that, paste it in, and let's take a look at how I can simplify this selector. So here it says A Elementor button, and then it also has just Elementor button. I'm going to actually take all of that out. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to change my color because I'd like to make this the same red as before. So you will see the actual change. So we get that change, but I'd really like to simplify this to just Elementor button. And you'll see what happens is the color goes away. Now the question is, why does that color go away, and how do I do an override so that I can get this thing to work? And I'm going to get rid of some of these other elements in here. I just want the background color. Now, one way to override this is by adding the important adding important to the end of your CSS style, so that you can then, or guess I should say my pair, my selector and property pair, property and value pair, there we go. And by adding this to the end of it, important, what we can do is override the specificity of our selector by forcing it to use background color as that background color as much as possible. So that can be really helpful to create more generic selectors, but do be aware that then it will do overriding over any other colors that you might have, possibly. So you just have to be careful of using that important. Here, I think it's really nice. Now maybe we want a little bit of space at the bottom as well. So to the bottom, I'm going to do a padding, autumn, 30 pixels. And maybe that's not giving me as much as I want. Maybe I'll try margin. There we go. Margin, bottom 30 pixels, and you can see I've raised those up a little bit off the background. So there's a lot of things that you can also do with this, and we could also maybe align that to one side versus the other. Then we might have to come back a little bit, though, and see what it is that is doing that alignment. And you can see in here, I've got the Elementor align left, and it says text left. So Elementor align left, and it might want that to be right instead. So you'd see that we could align that button, but there's going to be some problems because we've got to find out where is the CSS being affected that makes that object move. Now, obviously, this is just a simple little change that I made that's just virtual, because anytime you make changes in your inspector, it's just a temporary change, but it's a great way of kind of testing things out. If I inspect this again and I want to make that text a little bit bigger, then I can try and find where that is, and maybe I could do a font size 150%, and you can see I can make that bigger. And then after I like that change, I could copy that CSS and paste it into the left-hand side, and that will now become a more permanent change rather than just having the virtual change, temporary change. Now, there's a couple other things that we might want to do here. You can see that we've got some different elements down here at the bottom. So the same sort of thing, we'd want to select those, and then we'd want to either choose the entire selector, or we might want to try and just make it more specific. Well, let's see. Go ahead and keep that the way it is. I'm just going to do color, and that's going to be that same red color that I have before. There we go. And I'm going to do my margin, change that to 0. You can see it's a little bit taller, so let's see, that will be 0, 10 pixels, 0. And of course, if we wanted to simplify that, we can take out those other selectors, but then we would have to add the important to this. Now, the reason I did this was because you'll notice that the color requires the important, but the margin didn't. And the reason why is because the color existed in the original selector, but the margin did not exist in the original selector. And since the margin didn't exist in the original selector, then I'm able to override it without having to put the important addition to it. Now let's see what we have for our images here. Now we would have to come back to our figure, and that's where we have the padding being done here. So we would add that, copy it, and we're going to make that a little bit closer so it matches using 10 pixels. And then here we'll have to do important so that we can get the same amount of space between the two before the heading. Now, every once in a while, it's a good idea for you to click on Publish. And the reason why is because we're actually going to go back to this page, and we're going to do one of the cool things. Now, instead of doing all of these overrides, I'm going to actually add classes and IDs before I actually apply those. Now, for example, I know to the top one here, this is my hero image, and so I'm going to add a hero ID so that I can force that page to be a certain height. So I'm going to go ahead and write that in already. This is going to be hero, and I know my min height for this thing is going to be 600 pixels. Now, the other thing that I'm going to do is something really fun. I'm going to add a filter to these images that makes them black and white, and when you hover over them, they'll go back to color. Now, if you're not sure about how to add some of this stuff, you may want to look at your CSS generator and see there's lots of different things like this. And if you're not sure how to do a text shadow, then you can use one of these things. You can put in some different values, and it will give you the code that you can copy and paste in. For example, should have thought about this, but maybe I want to put a red drop shadow or text shadow to some of the text that I have here. So I'm going to copy that, come back to this big heading at the top, and add that in so that, that's the wrong one. I want it to the H1. There we go. So you can see I get a red drop shadow or text shadow around the heading there. Now, I found another one that does filters, and they have a grayscale filter that you can apply. And you can see here's without the filter, and then you can take that right up and you get that filter turns into black and white. And I'm going to copy that. Reason why is because in here, I know that I want to have a filter that says, when I use black and white, I'm going to take an image that has been given that class, and I'm going to add that grayscale to it. Now, notice that I have BW before I have image. A lot of times it'd be nice for us to have image and have the class actually applied to the image itself. But I know using this builder, when I add my classes, it adds it to the wrapper before it adds it to the image. So that's really important to kind of know about ahead of time. So let's go ahead and publish this real quick. And the reason why is because I now have to click out of this. And now I need to go back into my builder, and I need to start adding these IDs and classes. Now to my section at the top, I'm going to edit the section so I can go into the Advanced tab and add that ID and just call it Hero. And you'll see that all of a sudden pushed the image down, making it a minimum height of 600 pixels. Now, obviously, we could have done the same thing in our builder because we already had that min height of 400, but here, because we're using an ID selector, it is more, it has a higher specificity than classes, so that's why it's doing that override really, really easily. And here, now we don't have to worry about anything. We could take it back to default if we wanted. You'll notice, though, that it does change the position of our text inside, and so then we just have to be aware of, like, where is that content position? And I'm going to go ahead and put the content at the bottom. And let's see. Make sure that I have that correct. Bottom. So it isn't perfect here. It's not recognizing that height as much as I wanted. So there are some caveats of using this, but we're not going to worry about all of those problems right now. Let's see. Bottom. Oh, I was hoping not to get that to fix, but it looks like it's going to be more troublesome than I hoped. So let's see what happens if I take this height, take it back to min height, and change that to 600. Now you'll see it is calculating correctly. So here's one of the problems. We might not see these styles applied when we're doing our website itself. It might be that we have to preview our site to be able to see those actual changes. And there might be some additional CSS stuff that we have to battle with in order to get things to move where we want. So sorry that didn't work out as well as I hoped. I'm going to move on. So I'm going to go next to my image, and this time I'm going to add that BW class. BW. And you'll notice that since I did BW and image, since this class is being applied to the wrapper, and I can see that if I inspect it, you'll see that the black and white class was added to the wrapper of this element, and then that has another overlay, and then it has a widget container, and then it has a wrapper inside that, and then finally it gets to the figure, and then it gets to the image inside. But because I did BW space or .bw space image, that's specific enough to do an override for this. So now I'm going to do the same thing here. BW, same thing here. BW, I'll update that. And now I'm going to go back to my dashboard. And then I can go straight to my customizer on the left-hand side of my appearance before I go to the page. It's just another way of doing it. Just be aware that you do want to go to that page before you start adding your your styles, just because otherwise you might not see them change. So now I'm going to come down to the bottom. I'm going to copy that BW image, paste it, and this time I'm going to add the hover pseudo class to it. I'm going to change that to background 0, grayscale 0, and grayscale 0. And now you'll see as I hover over this, I get a transition. Now, if I want to make that a little bit smaller, more of a transition is really where I was going. If I want to make that transition from one to the other a little bit slower, you want to put it on the first class, the default class, not on the hover effect. So I'm going to call this transition, and I'm going to just say all, just to make it easy. And this is going to be 0.5 seconds, and it's going to be ease in, out, or ease in. It doesn't really matter exactly which one you use, but now you'll see that I can make the transition from one to the other a lot slower and a little bit more interesting. Once you're done, you would publish that CSS, and then once you're ready to deliver this website, you would take all this CSS, and this is the way I would do it at least. I would cut it out of here, or I would copy it, really is what I would copy it. Go back to my regular CSS file, and I would paste that stuff, making sure that I then updated that file. Then I would go back to the customizer and remove the styles from the customizer, because now these styles have been put into the main theme CSS file instead of being in the customizer itself. I get really nervous about having these here, and now you can see it's not applying until I refresh a few times. And maybe when I do refresh, let me go back to the landing page. Yeah, now it is applying to it after I've refreshed, and we can see that those styles are then applied. We still have a problem with the thing over here at the top about it not getting that style in, but hopefully you can understand from this tutorial about how you can include custom styles, IDs, and class selectors into your builder environment. And this is really great when you're trying to do multiple pages. Now, one thing to be aware of is utilities as well versus IDs. Utilities might be a CSS style that does just a simple color. Here's a text white, or a text black, or a text red, or a background red. That's really, really common in using builders, is that you make classes that are specific to one thing that you want to accomplish. Anyway, if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.